One bad year. That's all it took. 40 years of saving, 40 years of discipline, 40 years of doing everything right. And one ordinary bear market quietly changed the next 30 years of one man's life. That shouldn't happen, but it does. Today, we're going to investigate why. Every investigation begins with a mystery. Here's ours. How can two retirees earn almost the same exact average investment return and still experience completely different retirements? That shouldn't be possible. If the average return is almost identical, shouldn't the outcome be almost identical? That's what most people believe. It's what I believed until I discovered something that completely changed the way I think about retirement. Let's investigate it together. Imagine two people. They retire on the same day. They both saved faithfully for 40 years. They both have about the same amount of money. They both own diversified portfolios. They both withdraw about the same amount each year to pay the bills. And over the next decade, they earn almost exactly the same average annual return. On paper, their retirements should look almost identical, but they don't. One sleeps well at night. The other slowly begins wondering if he'll outlive his money. Same market, same average return, completely different retirement. How? Where did their paths separate? The answer isn't hidden in the return. It's hidden in something almost nobody sees. And once you see it, you'll never look at retirement the same way again. For a while, nothing looked unusual. Both retirees settled into retirement. Morning coffee tasted a little better because there was no office to rush to. The calendar finally belonged to them. They visited family. They took short trips. They enjoyed the freedom they'd spent decades earning. If you had met them 6 months after retirement, you would have said they were living the same life. Then, the market had one bad year. Not a financial apocalypse, not another Great Depression, just an ordinary bear market. The kind investors have seen many times before. Neither retiree panicked. Neither abandoned the plan. Neither sold everything and ran to cash. They stayed invested because history teaches us something important. Markets fall and eventually markets recover. They believed that and they were right. The market did recover. So here's the mystery. If the market recovered, why didn't both retirements recover? Because while everyone was watching the market, something else was happening quietly, almost invisibly. Life didn't stop because the market went down. The mortgage still had to be paid. The grocery bill still arrived. The utility company still expected its money. Birthdays came, anniversaries came. Life kept moving. And every month, our second retiree needed income. He wasn't selling investments because he panicked. He was selling them because he had to live. At the time, it looked like an ordinary bear market. It wasn't. Most people think retirement is just the working years in reverse. It isn't. Retirement changes the rules. When you're working, a market decline can actually help you. That sounds backwards, but think about it. Every paycheck buys investments. If prices fall, your next contribution buys more shares. You're accumulating. Time is still on your side. A bad year is inconvenient. Sometimes it's even an opportunity. Retirement quietly flips that equation upside down. The paycheck stops. Now, instead of buying shares, you're selling them. That one change changes everything. Every withdrawal during a market decline quietly removes shares from your portfolio. Those shares never come back. When the market finally recovers, there are fewer shares left to participate in that recovery. The market came back. Your portfolio may even come back, but something fundamental has changed. Your retirement is trying to recover with fewer soldiers on the battlefield. That's the part almost nobody sees. Financial planners have a name for it: sequence risk. Don't let the name intimidate you. The concept is remarkably simple. It's not just how much your investments earn, it's when they earn it. And once you understand that, the mystery begins to solve itself. Let's imagine something. Retiree A experiences several good market years immediately after retiring. His portfolio grows while he's making withdrawals. By the time the first bear market arrives, his account has already built a cushion. Now imagine retiree B. He retires only months before a significant decline. He's making the same withdrawals, but now he's selling investments while prices are depressed. He's permanently giving up shares that can never participate in the rebound. Fast forward 10 years. Both retirees average almost the same annual return. Most people expect identical outcomes, but retirement doesn't reward averages. Retirement lives in the order of events. One person's gains arrived before the storm. The others arrived after. Same average, different sequence. Completely different result. The average return wasn't lying. It was answering the wrong question. It just wasn't telling the whole story. Imagine reading two books. Both contain exactly the same words. One is printed in the correct order. The other has every chapter shuffled randomly. Same words, different outcome. Average return is a little like counting the words. Sequence risk is reading the story. And in retirement, the story matters far more than the average. That's why two people can honestly say, I averaged 8%. And one enjoys retirement while the other spends every market decline wondering if the math will hold. The numbers didn't betray him. The sequence did. Now, I want to leave the spreadsheet for a minute because this isn't really a story about numbers. It's a story about people. At first, the consequences are almost invisible. The trip to Italy gets postponed. Let's wait until the market comes back. The kitchen remodel can wait another year. Helping a grandchild with college? Maybe later. Each decision feels temporary, reasonable, responsible. No single decision feels life-changing. But retirement doesn't usually change all at once. It changes one decision at a time. One postponed dream becomes another, then something even more valuable begins to disappear: confidence. Instead of asking, where should we travel this year? The conversation quietly becomes, can we afford to travel? Instead of saying, we've always wanted to see Alaska, the conversation becomes, maybe next year. Next year quietly becomes never. That's when I realized something. Retirement calculators measure balances. They measure rates of return. They measure probabilities. They even measure how likely your money is to last. But they don't measure confidence. They don't measure freedom. They don't measure peace of mind. They don't measure what it feels like to wake up every morning, wondering if the next market decline changes everything. Because spreadsheets don't feel anxiety. People do. And that's why I believe so many retirement conversations miss the point. Money was never the destination. Money was simply the vehicle. What people are really trying to protect is choice. The freedom to visit the grandchildren without checking the market first. The freedom to say yes instead of maybe. The freedom to enjoy retirement instead of managing it. Sequence risk quietly attacks those freedoms. Not overnight, not dramatically, quietly. One withdrawal, one postponed dream, one compromise at a time. And then, 10 years later, People wonder why retirement feels different than they imagined. It isn't because they failed. It isn't because they made foolish investments. It isn't because they were irresponsible. Sometimes they simply retired at the wrong moment. That's a difficult truth, but understanding it is also empowering because once you understand the risk, you can start preparing for it. And preparation is very different from prediction. No one can predict the next bear market. No one. But you don't have to predict the storm to build a stronger roof. That's what good retirement planning is. Not predicting tomorrow, preparing for it. Now, here's the good news. Everything we've talked about so far can sound intimidating, but sequence risk is not a sentence. It's a risk, and risks can be managed. The biggest mistake retirees make isn't experiencing a bear market. It's assuming every retirement plan responds to a bear market the same way. They don't. Think back to our two retirees. One wasn't necessarily smarter. He wasn't necessarily wealthier. He wasn't necessarily earning spectacular returns. He simply had more flexibility. Maybe he kept a larger cash reserve. Maybe he could temporarily reduce spending. Maybe he had a part-time income. Maybe he delayed a large purchase. The specific strategy isn't today's lesson. The principle is he had options, and options create freedom. The more options you have, the fewer decisions the market gets to make for you. That's one of the biggest mindset shifts I hope you take away from today's investigation. During your working years, discipline builds wealth. During retirement, flexibility protects it. Those are two completely different skills. Most retirement plans are designed to answer one question. How much money do I need? That's important. But after today's investigation, I think there's a better question. How resilient is my plan if life doesn't cooperate? Because life rarely cooperates perfectly. Markets don't move in straight lines. Inflation doesn't ask permission. Unexpected expenses don't schedule appointments. Retirement isn't lived inside a spreadsheet. It's lived in the real world, and the real world is messy. That's why I believe successful retirement planning isn't about building the perfect plan. It's about building a plan that can survive an imperfect world. That's a very different goal. Let's return to our two retirees one final time. Not to compare investment returns, not to compare account balances. Let's compare something much more important. Their lives. One retiree continued making choices. The other slowly began protecting himself from running out of choices. That's the difference. One still asked, "Where should we go this year?" The other quietly began asking, "Can we afford to go?" Same market, same average return, different retirement. Why? Because retirement follows different rules than wealth accumulation. When you're building wealth, time is usually your greatest ally. When you're living on that wealth, timing can become your greatest risk. That's the lesson. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The next time someone says, don't worry about the ups and downs. Just focus on the average return. I hope you'll remember today's investigation because average return tells you what happened. Sequence risk explains why it mattered. Those are not the same thing. And confusing those two ideas has quietly changed thousands of retirements. The market may recover, your portfolio may even recover, but your retirement is now trying to recover with fewer shares than before. So, what do you do with this information? First, don't let today's investigation create fear. Let it create clarity. Because once you understand the risk, you can actually prepare for it. And that's exactly why I created the Retirement financial stress test. Not to predict the future, no one can do that, but to help you ask better questions about your own retirement plan. Questions like, what happens if my bad years come first? How flexible is my income plan? Would I be forced to sell investments during a major decline? How many options do I really have? Those are the questions that determine whether a retirement plan merely looks good or actually survives real life. If you'd like a copy of the Retirement Financial Stress Test, it's completely free. You'll find the link in the description below. I think it will help you look at your retirement through a completely different lens. And if today's investigation challenged the way you've always thought about retirement, I'd love to have you join us. Every week, we investigate another retirement myth, another hidden risk, or another assumption that deserves a closer look. Because retirement is too important to leave to rules of thumb, marketing slogans, or wishful thinking. It's your future, and it deserves better questions. If that's the kind of conversation you'd like to have every week, I'd be honored to have you subscribe. I'd love to see you back for our next investigation. Before we leave, I want to come back to the sentence that started today's investigation. One bad year. That's all it took. Not because the market was unusually cruel, not because the retiree made terrible decisions, but because retirement follows different rules than most people realize. Understanding those rules won't eliminate every risk, but it can help you prepare for them. And preparation is one of the greatest gifts you can give your future self. Because better retirement decisions don't begin with better predictions. They begin with better questions. Keep checking your assumptions before reality checks them.